Hello everyone. Today I will present a study titled Patterns of Heated Tobacco Product Use and Biochemically Verified Smoking Status Among Customers of Dedicated HTP Stores. No funding was provided for this study. If we want to address the public health impact of heated tobacco products, we need to look at whether they promote smoking cessation, so if they are used by smokers in order to substitute for smoking, whether they could perpetuate smoking by being attractive to non-smokers or by making former smokers relapse back to smoking. And in that respect, it is imperative to look at patterns of use and the characteristics of users of HTP products. So the study was conducted in 2 out of the 5 available at that time dedicated heated tobacco product stores in Athens, Greece. And the purpose of this study was to identify the user characteristics, the HTP use patterns, and of course the smoking history, but also the current smoking status of HTP users, with the latter being biochemically objectively verified by measuring exhaled carbon monoxide on site. The study included 373 participants, of whom 113 were current smokers, so dual users, while the rest were former smokers. The only criterion for study inclusion was that they were visiting the stores in order to buy products for their own use. So all of them were by definition HTP users. 7 participants, that is 1.9% of the study sample, were never smokers who were using HTPs, and they will be analyzed separately. Concerning the demographic characteristics, there were only minor differences between current and former smokers in a household economic status. Gender, age distribution were identical. Now, on the smoking history and patterns of use of HTP products between the 2 groups. There were no differences in the smoking duration between groups or in their smoking dependence as assessed using the first item of the Fagerström test of cigarette dependence. So the smoking characteristics between former smokers, and in that case we were talking about the past smoking history, and current smokers was similar. Current smokers reported a substantial 50% reduction in the number of cigarettes smoked daily after initiating HTP use. Concerning the smoking history and smoking characteristics of the 2 groups, the smoking duration and consumption before HTP use initiation was similar between groups, while minor statistically significant differences were observed in dependence on smoking as assessed by the Fagerström test of cigarette dependence, specifically the first item, which addresses time since waking to using the first cigarette. Concerning the patterns of HTP use, former smokers were using HTPs for longer period, and they were more likely to use them daily compared to occasional. Concerning harm perceptions for HTPs, both groups classified HTPs as less or substantially less harmful than smoking in the vast majority of cases. A substantial proportion, about 10% in the whole sample, reported that they didn't know what was the harm of HTPs compared to tobacco cigarettes. Finally, a very small proportion classified HTPs as absolutely harmless. We performed a logistic regression analysis, so a multivariate analysis, in order to identify factors associated with being a former smoker. Only 2 factors showed statistical significance: using HTPs daily compared to occasionally, and the duration of HTP use, which specifically showed that for every month of additional duration of HTP use, the odds of being a former smoker were increased by about 6%. Now, on the 7 participants, that is 1.9% of the whole sample, who reported they had never smoked and they were using HTPs, more than half of them were using HTPs occasionally rather than daily, and importantly, none of them became a current smoker, both in terms of their self-report, but also by measuring exhaled carbon monoxide, in which case all of them had less than 3 ppm. So to conclude, the vast majority of HTP users who go to specialized stores to get the products were current or former smokers, so people with a smoking history. A substantial proportion, about 69%, reported being former smokers, and that was objectively verified by measuring exhaled carbon monoxide. Use by never smokers was quite uncommon, less than 2% of the whole study sample. So it seems that in this sample of users visiting dedicated THP stores to get the products, the main drive is to reduce or stop smoking. Of course, more studies, particularly longitudinal studies, are needed to examine the smoking cessation potential of HTPs, but also in general their public health impact, a major part of which depends on how the products are used and why the products are used by consumers. Thank you very much.